Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and I can't figure out why the music wasn't just playing. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, and we have an exciting show in store for you this morning. Music stopped. Yeah, I'm not sure why the music isn't playing. I hope that you can hear me okay. We have an exciting show this morning. Sheriff Jim Allard will be our guest. We always look forward to having Steuben County Sheriff Allard. We'll be talking to him about, obviously, the storms and what he witnessed and what he experienced. And we've got a lot of other topics we'll be talking to him about as well. All right, let's get right to it. A comment from a viewer after yesterday's program. Our region needs to step up. GoFundMe pages, please, for the New York flood victims. And FEMA needs to provide free trailers to the victims like they did to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina and northern PA and our region in upstate New York. This is all besides the Red Cross. Now, the Red Cross, of course, is accepting donations. They're doing a great job. People do seem to respond to GoFundMe attempts. I will admit my ignorance on this. I know people do respond well to GoFundMe attempts, but does that get into the hands? I'm asking the viewers here, anyone who have experienced GoFundMe, does that get into the people's hands as well as the Red Cross is able to provide assistance? That's just a question and not a loaded one. Yes, free trailers were provided to Katrina victims, flood victims in New Orleans, while they fixed up their places, and then they turned them back in when finished. I personally witnessed this in the West Bank side of New Orleans. Thank you for the comment. All right, we've got a lot to get to this morning. More on the kind of perceived media, not perceived, I don't like when the media says that, the media bias where some are calling this out at this point, where you have Vance and the Trump campaign calling out what they are saying is clear bias. And we showed you an example of that yesterday with the Time magazine cover, her moment with a painting of Kamala Harris. We're going to talk about that. We also have quite a few things here about both campaigns from various outlets. But first, I thought we'd start with a positive note. According to Ricky Schlott, more women are skipping college to make six figures as electricians, car mechanics, and truck drivers. With the high price of tuition at four-year colleges and America's owing nearly $2 billion in student loan debt, some young people are questioning the benefits of a traditional bachelor's degree and opting to work with their hands. Vocational school enrollment shot up 16% last year, reaching a record level since the National Student Clearinghouse began recording such data. Gen Z has even been dubbed, quote, the tool belt generation, which is interesting, coming off of an article also by Ricky Schlott yesterday that showed Gen Z is very easily manipulated when it comes to their vote by influencers and celebrities, saying that an endorsement from a Taylor Swift or Beyonce could change their vote. Not necessarily meaning that the endorsement will make them vote for that person, but may make them have the opposite reaction and vote for the other person. But either way, probably showing how celebrity has become very scary and very, very influential. While the majority of workers in trades are men, a growing number of young women are opting to work with their hands. In 2020, 11.6% of those who completed an apprenticeship program in the U.S. were female, according to the Department of Labor. And if you want to find this piece for yourself, it's at the New York Post. And she goes and interviews some of the people that have made this decision, some of the women, young women who've made that decision to go into the trades. And I will say, at a time when we see the unrest on college campuses and the strain, I like how Van Jones said it about the Democrat Party, the marbling of anti-Semitism on college campuses and the radicalization of college students. You really can't blame someone for saying, why would I spend, let's just make up a number, $100,000. And at the end of that $100,000, I get a piece of paper and then I get a job and try to work off the $100,000. Or why not go right into a profession where I could be making $100,000 right out of the gate? But speaking of that, on college campuses, colleges are now bracing for the renewed, as they put it here, from semaphore pro-Palestinian protests. I think they long ago crossed over to no longer pro-Palestinian, but more so anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-American. Some Jewish organizations at U.S. universities have voiced concerns about the potential resumption of campus protests against Israel's war in Gaza as the start of the academic year nears. And I'm sure we will hear a lot about this. Do you think on your first day of school, the excitement that you had on your first day of school, well, some people may not have had excitement, but do you want to spend that first week, month, whatever, camping out instead of exploring the campus and your dorms? Or maybe you're a second, third, fourth year student. Do you really want to spend those first few weeks outside in a tent yet again? Or as some, and I never got an update, but as some went with the decision of hunger strikes. Remember the one young lady who went on a hunger strike and then was outraged that the war had not ended in the Middle East and that she was hungry. Now, of course, she did not get drafted into this hunger strike, but again, acted as if she had. But I'll continue. Unless things change quickly, I have zero doubt that things will go back to where they were last year, the director of American Jewish Committee's Center for Education Advocacy told the Times of Israel, which cited advocacy groups and activists to argue that many U.S. universities are ill-prepared for more demonstrations and encampments, just like they were in the past. I mean, they threw out the safety and security of their Jewish students and coddled the anti-Israel protesters, and that did not go well. Some lost their jobs, some didn't, some hunkered down, but you saw enrollments go down, you saw a lot of public backlash. So I'm not sure how this is all going to play out, but I'm sure we'll be bringing it all to you here on the program. It's also going to be interesting, and I know I've been saying it for quite some time, how this plays out at the Democratic National Convention. Ironically, back in Chicago, where we saw protests become a major focal point of the 1968 convention. So will we see, because there's still many that are not happy with Harris and Walz. I know you won't hear that from the media, but as Van Jones said it, the marbling of the Democrat Party with the anti-Semitic bigotry, there are still many that will not support Harris and will not support Walz. The end of the last academic year was marked by these protests and these encampments, leading in some cases to mass arrests and police action. And if you recall, really a lot of the pushback, at least when it came to the college campus mindset, was that some of these deans actually called the police. So there's no problem that there was violence, there was intimidation against Jewish students, this kind of destruction that we saw. That was not the problem, that the dean let that happen. This is Columbia specifically. That was not the problem. The problem ended up being that she called the police. And I guess they believe, because it's also very much an anti-police movement, that put their students in danger. Never mind the hypocrisy of saying that, as those same students are putting the Jewish students in danger. But this is going to play out very interestingly as the school year begins. And speaking of that kind of marbling that Van Jones highlighted, Ilhan Omar did win her primary in Minnesota. Now, that was coming off after a few squad losses, as kind of a squad losing streak, if you will. Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar will beat back a primary challenge from former Minneapolis City Council member Don Samuels, all but guaranteeing that the 4 original members of the squad of Progressive House Democrats will be on the ballot this November. So you had what they're now trying to call kind of the outlier, the Bowmans, etc. Omar's victory is, and this is interesting, is helpful for the progressives, especially those critical of Israel's war in Gaza, after a pair of high-profile losses to moderate Democrat primary challengers. This is such a disgrace that this is how they do it. Coming from CNN, let me read that. After a pair of high-profile losses to moderate Democrat primary challengers, heavily backed by big spending, pro-Israel outside groups. Those organizations which spearheaded the unseating of squad members Jamal Bowman of New York and Cori Bush of Missouri. They did not invest in Omar's Minneapolis area district, a deep blue enclave where Democrats tend to run up the score in statewide elections. By its closing day, the race had been just around $3 million in ad spending, with Omar's campaign accounts contributing $2.75 million on their own. So there's just a couple quick updates to start the program. Now, the New York Post editorial board, we're going to move quick this morning because we're going to spend a lot of time with Sheriff Allard later on. And so I want to make sure that we get to everything that we want to and need to get to this morning. But the New York Post editorial board has, I think, a really interesting piece if you have a moment, and it gets really into the weeds in a good way. But Israel should finish off Hamas and resist the Biden-Harris demands for concessions to terrorists. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's planned Mideast trip will mean more pressure on Israel to make concessions. If I'm not mistaken, I heard this morning that was put off because of what they're saying is a really dicey time to visit. But what the Post editorial board says, Israel needs to stand tough as Blinken, Biden, and Harris try to bully it into sacrificing its security needs to their partisan domestic political needs. All right, let's take our first break. We are just getting started here. Thank you for joining us. We are going to cover a lot about the campaigns. I know in the morning we kind of play a little bit of catch up. That's what we're going to do right here. And then get into the nitty gritty, as it were. And then later on, Sheriff Allard. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on historic Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. There is a report out now that Hunter Biden has asked the U.S. Embassy in Italy for help landing the Burisma deal while Joe was vice president. Now, that's a big ask, by the way. Hunter's big ask, an apparent attempt to use his father's position of power to land the deal for Burisma, the Ukrainian gas giant that he sat on the board for, came to light only after State Department records were released to the New York Times after Joe Biden ended his 2024 election bid. What's the chances of the timing on that? And that's why the New York Post editorial board, I feel like I'm really loud this morning, said the elites decided Hunter Biden can finally be a scandal now that Joe is out. Now they can report on it and get some salacious headlines because let's face it, for a reporter, normally this story of Hunter Biden would have been so juicy. It would have been a dream come true. But instead, just like Biden's mental health, it was something to cover up and not report on because they had an important election to win. That's why you see the same mindset of, hey, we don't mind if Harris answers our questions or does a press conference. It doesn't matter. We just got to get this thing into the barn in November. So we have no problem running out the clock. It's the same mindset. The same groups that were censoring or silencing the story on Hunter Biden at the time are the same groups that are now just talking about Harris's momentum and looking the other way when she refuses to answer questions or says it's essentially a strategy to not talk with reporters. Imagine that's your job, is to try to get interviews and try to find out the information from a candidate, mind you, a candidate that never received a single vote from her own party to now be in the position she's in. That seems to warrant, to me, wanting to ask her questions, wanting to ask Walls, questions, but not to the media that writes those glowing pieces like we see in Time, where she was not interviewed. It was all of her surrogates being interviewed. But Hunter Biden is a corrupt con artist, says the New York Post editorial board, who used his father's position to leverage the government and make millions for himself. Now that Joe Biden has been successfully pushed aside, officials are allowed to admit this, and the New York Times is allowed to report it. It's rotten, unscrupulous, and cynical hypocrisy. Emails reveal that Hunter, while his father was VP, wrote a letter to the U.S. ambassador to Italy asking for introductions to help the Ukraine gas company Burisma land a lucrative contract with Italy. That's why Burisma was paying Hunter $1 million a year to sit on its board. not for his energy, expertise, or work ethic, which he had neither, and was, by his own admission at the time, an irresponsible crack addict, but that his last name on an email could make the State Department stand at attention. This is incredibly unethical, and Democrats in the media know it. But for 4 years, they have pretended that the Hunter Biden scandal didn't exist, that it's all just conservatives pouncing. The administration tried to hide the Italian emails, but get this, the Times knew that they were holding back because they didn't include emails from Hunter's laptop, the same laptop that got the New York Post, banned from Twitter. And attacked by the rest of the press as fake. The irony in all that is not dead. How convenient that then these messages surface only after Biden Sr. had been forced into the retirement home, and the media can claim it doesn't matter. But it always mattered. The Italian job is another piece of the puzzle, but let's be clear. This isn't a new scandal. And I don't want to go into all of this because that's the reason that the elites, and I like the way they put that, the elites allowed this to now become a scandal. Because they can report on it, it's still got some juicy details, but it no longer, in their mind, hurts the Democratic ticket. Meanwhile, voters should consider how this was all covered, hidden and dismissed, and how the same thing is happening now with Kamala Harris. Don't do interviews, don't answer questions, censor criticism as misinformation. They have no shame. Yes, this is the same media that protected Biden for so long, who's now in charge of the very shortened political calendar for President of the United States, where one of those candidates, one of those nominees, has never received a single vote for that job. And I've got to say, and I know I keep reiterating it, but you've got to highlight that as another reason why the media should be asking her questions, which I think is only fair at a time when we know Trump goes to some very unfriendly places and answers some questions and gets that pushback and that anger. Same with Vance over the weekend. If you saw those interviews, the CNNs, the ABCs, the NBCs, very, you can see the look of disdain on their face as they ask him questions. But now we're entering the 24th day that Kamala Harris has been the presumptive Democrat nominee, where she has not held a press conference. We're going to talk about that when we come back, because we tie those all in together. You may say, why take up this much time on Hunter Biden? It's important to note that the same people covering up that story then are the same people covering up stories now. Keep that in mind. All right, we got a lot of messages coming in, a lot of waves coming in, and we're all excited because we have Sheriff Jim Allard coming up in just a moment. Just a moment, I should say, about an hour. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. And we are back. For some reason, no music this morning. So it's always something new and something fun, isn't it, when you're dealing with technology? But I think that's fine. I say we have so much to talk about. Let's just jump right in. Why do we need music? All right, so 24th day. We're going to the 24th day that Kamala Harris has not held a press conference since emerging as a presumptive Democrat nominee. Again, wait till you hear the way they're framing it and the way they're spinning it. And I'll tell you that in just a moment. But many people calling her out, though it's in more conservative circles. Newsbusters executive editor Tim Graham expects her to follow President Biden's 2020 playbook when he was famously accused of hiding in his basement. Quote, Kamala Harris should absolutely hold a press conference. One would expect it when she names her vice presidential pick, but we cannot expect her to break from Biden's serial avoidance of press conferences. Since the 2020 campaign, we have witnessed a bizarre spectacle of Donald Trump granting wide access to networks that suggest he's a fascist and hammer him daily, while Biden and Harris won't grant interviews to media outlets that gurgle all over them and their historic accomplishments. Either way, they think the press can never be servient enough, or they are projecting a complete lack of confidence in their efforts to put complete sentences together. And I think that may be what it boils down to, that there is, quote, so much momentum, because the media is allowing that momentum, that a typical Harris slip-up could knock her down a peg in the polling, and they don't want that right now. They just have to play this out for less than 3 months. That's all they need to do. So why put themselves in that position? But from Mr. Graham's point, from a media that wants to see her succeed, wants to see her do good. That's why I believe if she goes to an interview, it's going to be such a friendly interview, probably pre-recorded, because they know her propensity for those word salads. You've heard it a million times. Oh, I had messages I was going to read. I'm sorry. I'm going to read the messages in just a second. So they know they don't want that highlighted. So they're happy with the way this is going. That's why I speculate whether or not there will be a debate, because that would be the first time. And that's why I want, mind you, the debate. And I know many viewers disagree with me on that. But that's why I want the debate, because it may be the only opportunity in 3 months to hear off the cuff from the woman who is the nominee for the Democrat Party for President of the United States. Again, having never received the vote for it, but nonetheless, that's where we're at. So that may be the only opportunity. But they are suggesting, when I say they, I mean the Harris campaign, that it's a strategy. This is what they sent to Fox News Digital last week. Quote, with under 90 days to go, the vice president's top priority is earning the support of the voters who will decide this election. In a limited time period and a fragmented media environment, that requires us being strategic, creative, and getting our message to those voters in the ways that are most impactful. Through paid media, meaning, ads, on the ground organizing, an aggressive campaign schedule, and of course, interviews that reach our target voters. It's a far cry from Trump's losing, ineffective strategy of rage posting, accosting reporters, and insulting the voters he'll need to win. If Donald Trump is so concerned about the success of VP Harris's campaign blitz, he could, get out there on the campaign trail. We are more than happy for him to shed a spotlight on his election-losing agenda. And then goes on to read all the points. So it is a strategy not to speak to reporters. We know that. It's nice that they admit that. They're happy buying ads because they received all that big money, even from the party that doesn't supposedly like big money. They received all that money right from the jump, and they're more than willing to spend it on these type of ads attacking Trump and ignoring their record, ignoring the Biden-Harris record, ignoring what she had said in the past, of course, which are questions the media should be asking about. All right, let's go to some, because I've got another way they're spinning this, but I was so excited to get right back at it that I forgot to read some of these comments. So let's get to the comments. I apologize. I am not skipping over any of them. All right. Good morning, Frank. Good morning. I'm going to add that as wave. I was thinking about what a college professor said to me 30 years ago. He's very liberal, but admitted that these universities educate the common sense right out of you. Yes, and it's very much become activism at this point. Remember, it was the faculty that was protesting along with these anti-Israel protesting students. So this is not only encouraged, it's rewarded. I mean, if you can be one of the protesters storming a building or being a part of that encampment as the police come in, you're the cool kid. You're the hero. And to the professor, you're who they want to be. So it's more about the activism. It's more about the indoctrination. And this isn't, if you're just joining this is in reference to college campuses being concerned. No, I don't think they are. I think people like you and I are concerned what the beginning of the school year is going to look like with protests and the like. And remember, I have made the prediction. I could ultimately be wrong. I do believe it'll trickle into some high schools who will see it as the cool college kids are doing this. We're going to do it. I don't think it'll be encampments and things like that, but I think you'll see some anti-Israel protests there. So yes, I would agree with your professor, probably not on anything else, but on that point. Another comment from a different viewer. In my opinion, this needs to be shut down from the start before they allow it to get out of control, meaning college campuses. The last thing we need is more unrest, especially with the election heating up. Universities should shut it down immediately or lose all aid. We have enough distractions. I could not agree more. We have enough distractions. I wish they would shut it down. I wish they would have shut down the original. I'm not. Listen, I know you have to do the disclaimer. We're all for free speech. Of course we are. But when it crosses that line of intimidating Jewish students, the violence, the destruction, it's no longer free speech. And when they're breaking the law, which is what they were doing when it came to the encampments, it needed to be shut down. So I couldn't agree more with that, because we don't need to be focused on that, as we have so little time to learn about our candidates and prepare for the November elections. A comment from another viewer. There is just no transparency in the Democrat Party. Scary, huh? There is no transparency. It's a part of their strategy. Should really come at this point, I guess, is no surprise. It doesn't make it any less frustrating. All right, here's another comment from a different viewer. It's sickening that Omar, yes, Elon Omar, won the primary with her hate speech, especially with the censorship that keeps shutting down social media and disinformation when facts are facts. She clearly hates America and promotes violence. That if you look at it, she was a part of those protests. Thank you, viewer. Keep the comments coming in. Very much a part of those protests. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was her daughter that was arrested at one, and she attended the protest with her. Okay, let's go back. Look at all these waves. We're having a blast this morning. All right, so we're talking about Kamala Harris not talking with the press. The press is fine with it, even though that's their job. It's how you would keep your job, to justify your job. Hey, I got this interview, I got that interview. They're fine with it. At the end of the day, it's all about getting to November. Democrat Governor Phil Murphy has a really interesting take on Harris avoiding interviews. This was during yesterday's broadcast of CNN News Central. Co-host Kate Boldon, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, asked Elon Musk wrapped this conversation with Donald Trump saying this, in part, that he thinks the country is at a fork in the road of destiny of civilization. And I think we need to take the right path, and I think you're the right path, he told Donald Trump. Not a hard-hitting interview, but as Trump made the point to say, he is doing interviews. Kamala Harris has not yet. Do you think that is becoming a problem for everyone? For you all supporting Kamala Harris, and there's not just a scheduling issue? Well, before I read Governor Murphy's comment on that, very little coverage is being, issue is being made about the lack of interviews by Harris. Yes, I will give credit that that question is being asked here, but you know you're asking it to a surrogate who will spin it. But the fact that she still needed to take a dig there and say that that was an easy interview for Trump. What do you think Harris, if she does one, now she says she wants to do one interview before the end of the month when we have less than 90 days before Election Day. Just one interview. She wants one interview. And do you think that'll be with Fox News? Do you think it'll be with an unfriendly outlet? Well, Elon Musk, if you want, Elon Musk invited her for an interview. So anyway, to think that that's some type of negative towards Trump when we saw what some of the other outlets he went to, and specifically the ones Vance went to over the weekend, and saw the anger and disdain. But giving the interviews, as Mr. Graham said in that piece, in that quote, that he goes to outlets that regularly call him a fascist. And yeah, he's still doing those, and there's criticism that he had one interview with Elon Musk. But this is how Murphy twisted the fact that Harris, as of this morning, has not held a press conference in 24 days. Quote, you won't be surprised to hear I had no time for the Musk-Trump interview. Oh. So I can't comment on any content. But no, not at all. I think she's had an extraordinary several weeks. Tim Walz is an inspired pick. She's on a roll. She is, as he has said, she's brought joy back into the whole arena of politics. There'll be plenty of time to do interviews. And heaven knows, one thing about last night, without having heard it, that was no interview. So when she does interviews, she'll deal with real journalists like yourself. To suggest that Trump hasn't dealt with real journalists when your candidate will not talk to journalists. So it's not an issue that she's not talking to the press, because she brings joy back to the arena politics. That is the spin as to why she's avoiding the press. Doesn't it concern you at a time when we're coming off the heels of a president who the media covered up for, that obviously is in mental decline? Doesn't it concern you not to hear from the candidate that no one got to vote for now? Meaning, okay, maybe if we would have heard more from Biden, we would have made a different decision. So maybe we shouldn't, fool me once scenario, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. So maybe now, or however it goes, I pulled a bush there, I can't remember how it goes. So maybe that's a fair question to ask. Hey, shouldn't we have some transparency? Shouldn't we be able to talk to the nominee for the president of the United States from the Democrat Party who never received a single vote? Doesn't the American people, the American voter, have a right to hear from her? I'm not talking about bringing joy back to politics, as Governor Murphy mentions. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, and then to criticize Trump when he's given so many interviews. It's remarkable. The hypocrisy knows no bounds. We got some other comments coming in. I'm running just a tad bit late. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking. We're hitting the ground running this morning. Thank you for all the comments, all the waves. This from a viewer. Didn't the Democrats want to tone down the rhetoric? What a bunch of hypocrites. Yeah, the rhetoric idea, well, it's the same thing with why the media has pretty much memory hold, is that what they call it? The assassination attempt on former President Trump. We learned, and this is coming from Axios, who has since had to lay off 10% of their employees, but Axios, a far-left organization, they were saying at the time that it would be almost PR propaganda if outlets, for Trump, if outlets continued to show that iconic, famous photo of him pumping his fist with blood streaming down his cheek. So, yeah, they can say they're going to tone down the rhetoric. How long did that last? Did it even last to the end of that Sunday? Right? Was it Sunday or Saturday? I don't know if it lasts 24 hours. Now, Team Trump and Vance are claiming that CNN operates as part of the Harris campaign. You know, you've heard me say it a million times on this program. If you want to look at what maybe Harris's campaign website should look like, go to CNN. Right now, we know she does not have her policy positions up on her own website. But, boy, they sure do a great job at CNN of promoting her. J.D. Vance is firing back at CNN because they published a report that detailed workers' rights abuse claims at a tech startup where the vice presidential candidate invested and served on the board. This is very reminiscent of Romney, how they went after him. But anyway, the only problem, Vance says he was nowhere near App Harvest and had left the company and its board in April 2021 before the conditions detailed in the report. This is twice in 1 week where CNN has blatantly ignored its own reporting in an attempt to smear J.D. Vance. Team Vance, National Press Director Taylor Van Kirk, told the New York Post, "The American people know that CNN only operates as an arm of Kamala's campaign and peddles garbage meant to mislead. I would recommend going to their website." Vance's spokesman said the networks intentionally obscured important facts while reporting the story of an investment Vance made in the now bankrupt tech startup. The Vance team claims CNN is laundering opposition research from Kamala Harris' campaign for president, and that the network purposely buried the key fact that JD was unaware of problems the company experienced after he left the board in April of 2021. Team Vance admits the senator was one of the company's first investors in 2018, but is refuting that he oversaw a toxic workplace. Quote, "Vance left App Harvest's board in April of 2021, well before any of the alleged toxic activity at the company took place. Vance was not involved in any of the operational decisions at App Harvest that are mentioned in CNN's story. A member of App Harvest's senior management team told CNN that JD had departed the company before the problems began, but CNN buried that fact at the very bottom of their article." Now, CNN did not comment to the New York Post. So I looked this morning because I looked at that, and I know I've said that a lot on the past about CNN looking like a campaign apparatus for Harris or before that Biden, etc. So I said, well, let me see if I can find anything negative about Walz or Harris. And I saw this, and at first I said, okay, maybe they are trying to cover their you-know-what after that J.D. Vance story. And this was the headline. Tim Walz once praised Muslim leader Assad Zaman, who shared anti-Semitic propaganda. And I said, oh, interesting. They haven't been bringing up the issue of potential stolen valor and things like that. But okay, here's a negative. And then going full circle bookend from the beginning of the show, I started to think, was this actually intended to have the opposite effect? Now, they're presenting it as negative. They're saying, no, this is not a good thing. Look, this is going to be bad. But at a time when we're learning that the Democrat Party, as Van Jones has put it, has a marbling of anti-Semitism in it, and they have been, specifically Biden was, and Harris has been now too, changing their positions to kind of stump to those voters, could this actually be a story to say, here's who Walz praised in the past? We're presenting it as bad, but read between the lines to all of those who call Genocide Joe and who are, they went after Harris in some way, and they've went after Walz a little bit. Was this actually to prove his bona fides to those very skeptical voting bloc of the anti-Semitic marbled part of the Democrat Party. Just interesting. That was just something I don't want to dive too much into, but when I read that, what seems as a negative to some voters, those non-committed voters that came out and voted, but in support of no one because they didn't like Genocide Joe. Just something to keep in mind, that maybe that isn't the negative piece that you and I would see. It is, of course, that he should not have been praising someone sharing anti-Semitic propaganda, but maybe that wasn't their ultimate reason behind the scenes for publishing that. We've got to take another short break. Comments coming in galore. Keep them coming in if you don't mind. We've got a lot to cover. If you have any questions for Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard, he will be our guest in the 7 o'clock hour, probably around 7:10, 7:20. We've got a lot to cover with him. But right now we do have to take that short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Coming up in just a moment with the Steuben Senior Services Fund, we'll be talking with Sheriff Jim Allard. Comment from a viewer. With Kamala's silence, she avoids being criticized for her weak governing abilities and, like you say, rides out the clock to the election. The Kamala mind-numb supporters with their gnat-like attention spans, coupled with media bias, joy speak, because, as Governor Murphy said, it's not about giving interviews. It's about the joy she brings to the arena politics. But I'll continue. It's their only strength. Trump's problem is he succumbs to their bait speak. And when they copied his no tips tax, he should have spun it like glad they're coming around to Trump's way of thinking. Why didn't they enact that years ago? You're not the only one to say that, viewer. There's been some, and I will pose this question to everyone watching, who are saying that it's kind of, I hate to use this term, but, well, I'll reword it, but be quiet mode. Not that he, just do rallies, do those type of things, but don't take the bait, as maybe what this viewer is saying. CNN puts it this way: as Trump flails and invites conspiracies, allies plead for him to stay on message. Now, I don't agree with how they worded it, but do you think that it is a time for him to stay on message? What I will point to is the debate and the kind of the run-up to the debate with Biden. He was staying on message. And even after the fact, staying on message. Now, as some polling numbers don't look as good for him, and you do have momentum for Harris. Now, I don't believe it's at the level the media is telling you and the polls are telling you, but there is momentum because you've got a fresh new candidate in there that has not been forced to take questions or answer any questions, and who is just giving speeches from a teleprompter. And I want to highlight that giving a speech from teleprompter, I'm not saying that in a negative way. That's just the facts. It is not off the cuff. It's not ad lib. So as that momentum was shifting, because, let's face it, running against Biden, as we saw, Trump was sitting pretty in the catbird seat. Now he has to change up his whole campaign strategy in less than 3 months. So do you want him to stay on message? Do you want to see more of the kind of the fighting Trump? I'll pose that question for you. I don't have necessarily an opinion. I don't like when he takes the bait in some of these scenarios that, again, lets the media not cover. And the media is not going to give Harrison Walz negative coverage. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. I'm not naive. But it gives them an opportunity to focus on that negative, and to the point where it could get to where Harris can use it as an excuse. And they could already have this in their back pocket if they want to. They'll say, we can't give Trump a platform because of what he said on Truth, or what he said to Musk, or whatever. They could do this at any point, don't get me wrong. But where she can say, we're not going to do the debate because we don't want to give him a platform because of his lies and falsehoods, as they always say. So do you think that Trump should stay on message? Do you want to see the fighting Trump that really helped him win in 2016? What Trump would you like to see? And we better decide quick, because we only have, not that he's listening to me, but we only have 3 months to really define who each candidate is. Now, I believe Trump has been defined. I believe there's a piece, again, by CNN. We're talking a lot about CNN this morning. But CNN says the candidates need to define their economic policies. that will be a huge win for whoever gets their message out the quickest, because Harris doesn't have any policy positions up on her website. She's talking generalities. She's not talking policy positions. I think Trump already proved his bona fides in that. I think Trump is already, with the 4 years he had in office, minus the pandemic, which no president could have planned for, I think he's already proved himself with what we've talked about with the kind of peace and prosperity, where the world wasn't on fire and we all were kind of doing pretty good. That's why before Biden dropped out, there was that nostalgia, the Trump nostalgia that they were calling it. But Harris should define her policy, but it's going to be more of the same. And is that what people are looking for? According to polls, according to the media, that's what they are looking for. Now, do I have... We got a lot of comments coming in. Let me look at time. Well, Tim Graham, I think I have enough to go through this quickly before we wrap up hour number 1. The political press demonstrated daily that it has zero respect for you, the voter. It is fawning over the momentum and gravitas of Kamala Harris, while the candidate has refused to do interviews or press conferences for weeks. Again, this is Tim Graham, and this is from Fox News. At the head of the line in the Time magazine piece that I talked about yesterday, which published a portrait of Kamala with the words, "her moment," in between puffy clouds of prose, Time writer Charlotte Alter admitted, quote, "Harris has yet to do a single substantive interview or to explain her policy shifts. Her campaign denied a request for an interview for this story. It's quite a contrast to Donald Trump, who Time interviewed for a cover story in April. That interview went long enough for Time.com to tell you the transcript was an 83-minute read. On top of that, they did a long fact check that was a 21-minute read. So giving access to the press gets you precisely nothing. Not this press, by the way. We do it right. There is no fact check for Kamala since there was no interview. Instead, Alter offered repeated comparisons to pop music superstars. And I had mentioned that to you yesterday. But that wasn't enough. Mass enthusiasm for a woman is nothing new. Harris's run comes just a year after the blockbuster summer of Barbie, Beyonce and Swift. This is actually in the article. Perhaps most implausible, Time dragged out Star Wars puffery. Senator Cory Booker claimed Harris has mastered the art of arm twisting required to pass major legislation. She has gone, he said, from being, I shouldn't have read this because I don't know Star Wars, Padawan to a Jedi Master. Overall, Alter summarized, quote, Harris has pulled off the swiftest vibe shift in modern political history. The media pretended that Harris creates vibe shifts, as if this proclamation about her momentum and her joyous warrior poses aren't part of the vibe shifting attempt, that they're not the ones attempting to shift that vibe. And I don't want to keep saying that. Even Kamala Harris, the horrible boss, is dismissed. We're told she's been let down by poor staff instead. Quote, one challenge for Harris has been the people around her. Over the years, a rotating cast of senior staff has clouded her message and raised questions about her abilities as a manager. So yes, actually what we learn is that this whole time when we thought she was bad, and even the Democrats parties were saying she was bad and didn't want her to be the nominee. No, it turned out it was the people around her, conveniently enough, those same people that quit because they didn't want to work for her anymore, the 91%. Amazing how that works. It's got to be good to be a Democrat dealing with the media, isn't it? So Harris is accountable for nothing, while former President Donald Trump sat for a hostile interview with a Times scribe. He asked Trump 11 questions about the Trump prosecutions and revenge for them, 5 questions about January 6th, 2 about potential political violence in 2025, 4 on fighting the deep state, 3 on his dictator for a day joke, and 4 on whether he'd seek to overturn the 22nd Amendment and seek a third term. I don't want to go through what everything Trump said because we are really, really late. Times, like other pro-Biden Harris outlets, will never acknowledge that Biden's number 3 Justice Department official, Matthew Conigello's resignation to join Alvin Bragg's team of Trump prosecutors. So he goes back into that. But this, again, we have to go. But I thought that was a really good piece. You can find out more at Fox News. But yes, you get nothing for going to the press. But if you don't go to the press and you're a Democrat, you get everything, and you get to have a large group of the mainstream media, pushing for your vibe shift. And it turns out those people that work for you that quit because it was a hostile work environment, they only quit because they just couldn't understand the message Harris was trying to get out there. Because how brilliant her messaging really is, those people were keeping her down. It's amazing. You really, You really can't make up how biased the media could be. But we got to take a break and wrap up our number one of Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Where does the time go? My goodness. Our number one in the books. Let's read a few comments before we go to our number two. This from a viewer. They've done enough crazy things, meaning the Biden-Harris ticket, I would assume. He needs to just stay, meaning Trump. He needs to just stay on his message and the whole "Are you better off 4 years ago" message. More presidential, more adult, less bullying, and more Reagan speak. So if you're just joining us, I'm asking the question, do you want to see the fighting Trump? Do you want to see the more disciplined Trump like we saw in the debate, where he did have a Trump-esque line where I'm not sure what Joe said. I don't think he knows what he said. But that was really the extent of it, where that was not typical of a debate. And I think many of us at the time were saying, please, keep it in check, because it was going very well. So I understand your point. Another comment from a different viewer. Stick to the message. Again, stick to the message. I truly believe that Trump becomes his own worst enemy when he goes into attacking his opponents. He appears bitter and angry. He should stick to the message. He then looks grounded and presidential. I do like that aspect of Trump. I think many of us after the assassination attempt thought that may be the direction he's headed. But now, to your point about the bitter and angry, it's frustrating because as the media talks about Harris's momentum, and he comes out with attacks that aren't necessary, I don't want to word it like that aren't about the actual race, it becomes a distraction. So I understand your point. Another comment with a good morning, so I'm going to add a wave. Good morning. It is funny how the supposed educated people are just fine not being educated or informed about their presidential candidates. But as Murphy says, it's all about feelings and emotion. Yes, it's all about her bringing joy to the political arena. So there you go. There's some comments from viewers. I see some other ones coming in right after the bell, but we got to go. So stay with us. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be talking with Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. So if you have any questions, let me know. And I can't believe our number one in the books coming up on our number two. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Our number two of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live and proudly from the Hesselson studio here on historic Market Street in the Gaffer District. Well, coming up in just a little bit, we're going to be talking with Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. He's going to join us in the studio, and boy, do we have a lot to cover. I received this comment at the end of the last hour, and I love this, actually. This is from Ken. Frank, my wife saw an appropriate comment on social media. Well, that caught my attention right away, because an appropriate comment on social media is rare indeed, but I will continue. J.D. Vance is the guy that mows your lawn when you're sick. Tim Walz is the guy that reports you to the Homeowners Association when your grass is too long. How appropriate, because if you see, I highly recommend this. Go to the New York Post. There's video that shows how the cops enforced Tim Walz's curfew, the COVID curfew. They were actually shooting paintballs at residents as they stood in their own doorways. So perfect to your point, Ken. Harrowing video shows dozens of riot cops enforcing Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's curfew order, spreading out in Minneapolis neighborhoods and peppering residents with paintballs while they stood on their porches and in their front doorways. The newly resurfaced clip, filmed in May of 2020 by Tanya Kerson, just outside her home, resembles a scene from a dystopian movie. It shows a tan Humvee rolling slowly down a quiet street in the Whittier neighborhood, followed by at least 25 heavily armed cops. Kirsten can be heard saying aloud, "Look at this. They just keep coming," before she's cut off by several officers barking orders at full volume. "Go home, go inside, get in your house now. Let's go," the officer shouted. The woman kept filming, at which point an officer can be heard saying, "Light 'em up." Suddenly, officers fired paintballs at the woman and her guests. The gun's muzzle flash clearly visible against the fading light of dusk. I don't know if you've ever been hit by a paintball. They hurt. Never mind the cleanup. Put that to the side. The incident came just days after the Minnesota governor, now Vice President Harris's running mate, issued a draconian executive order imposing a strict 8 p.m. curfew. This was to tamp down on the violent riots following the murder of George Floyd. I was thinking it was the COVID curfew, too, because he was very strict on COVID. But this is remarkable. This was happening from issues and from walls. Amazing. And this comes at another time when you go to the Homeowners Association comment. A few months before that crackdown, Walz took a great deal of criticism for instituting a hotline that allowed Minnesotans to snitch on each other for violating social distancing protocols in the pandemic's early days. So you tie those two together. Again, not something you'll hear in the media, but something worth noting nonetheless. So if you're just joining us, I got to read that comment one more time because I thought it was a great comment. J.D. Vance is the guy that mows your lawn when you're sick. Tim Walz is the guy that reports you to the Homeowners Association when your grass is too long. Thank you very much for that. That made me laugh this morning. Now Kamala Harris's campaign, as we were talking about the media bias does not go far enough. That's why they still don't want to give interviews, because even though they know they're going to friendly outlets, as that one comment said by Graham, they are going to friendly outlets that want to see them succeed. They still won't do the interviews. Trump is going to outlets that call him a fascist, and what do you get for it? Nothing. They still call him a fascist. They still attack him. So why would she, again, to Van Jones's point yesterday, 2 days ago, why would she do an interview? She doesn't need to. But the fact that they get this kind of coverage and still won't play ball and be friendly with the outlets trying to do so much to support her, and now they're actually editing news headlines. This is Harris's campaign team editing news headlines in her favor without the outlet that the article came from, their knowledge. Harris's campaign team has been silently editing news headlines in Google search results to make it seem like major news outlets are on her side. The altered headlines all paired, keep this part in mind. I mean, she doesn't have the control over Google to go in there like that, but they are paid for by Harris for President banner. So it does say that. They were changed without the news outlet's knowledge, according to Axios. Nearly a dozen publishers were swept up in a faux headline campaign, including major companies like The Guardian, Reuters, CBS News, the Associated Press, and PBS. This is another piece that you can find right there on New York Post. I'm trying to see some of the ones that they changed because I don't want to read all of them. But even smaller publications like North Dakota's WD Radio also saw its headlines changed. The ads include links to real articles from news outlets, but the headlines and descriptive text have been edited to cast a supportive light towards the presidential hopeful, because they hope that you won't go any further. They're hoping that you won't click on the article. You just want to see the glowing headline, which, man, there's got to be something legally wrong with that. For example, one ad that ran alongside an article from The Guardian shows a headline that reads, VP Harris fights abortion bans, Harris defends reproductive freedom, and then includes supporting text underneath the headline that reads, VP Harris is a champion for reproductive freedom and will stop Trump's abortion ban. Another, linking to an NPR story, reads, Harris will lower health costs, with supporting text that says Kamala Harris will lower the cost of high-quality, affordable health care, Axios reported. So you get the idea. So even all the positive, momentum, joyous media coverage that she has received, it does not go far enough. Now, the New York Post has invited Vice President Harris to conduct her first major interview as the Democratic nominee with the New York Post. I would not hold my breath. Here's a modest proposal. Let it be me, said Michael Goodwin. I promise to treat you fairly, which is an old-fashioned concept in journalism. Yes, I know my request is the ultimate long shot. Some might even call it an indecent proposal. They'll say you have your choice among all the major friendly media outlets that are competing for the big scoop. So why give it an opinion columnist at the New York Post? After all, the big guys, especially the networks, are probably promising to make you look fabulous, politically and personally. They'll bring professional makeup artists, hairstylists, and the most flattering lighting and backdrop that money can buy. With me, you won't need any of that. You could wear jeans and sneakers. Yeah, why not? I'll pose that there. I guess I didn't have to get right in your face. I'll pose that to Vice President Harris as well. More than welcome on the airwaves of Frankly Speaking. We've got to take a short break because I know that we have the sheriff coming up, and I've got to get some things in order. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Stay tuned. A lot coming up. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We've got a couple quick things to get to before the sheriff arrives. James Carville, who was on MSNBC, the program called The Beat. James Carville, the Raging Cajun, says, we're looking at a different world today than we did 24 days ago. That's pretty clear. They're still trying to find their sea legs out there. When you get down to the fact that the Speaker of the House, who's from Benton, Louisiana, has to tell the other House Republicans to calm the racial stuff down, you know there's trouble out there. They're starting. Okay, I hate to make predictions, but I will say this right now. There's a better chance that Harris wins by 5 than Trump wins by 1.5. So that comes as a caveat. I'm not saying she's going to win by 5 or he's going to win by 1.5, but that I think that that's the range where we're in right now. I detest to make election predictions. I think there is still a tough, hard part, but I could see him winning by a little bit. But if somebody's going to win this by more than a little bit, it will be the Democrats. I'm just saying, I'm not predicting. Interesting. He's changed his tune quite a bit lately. He's starting to sound more like a Republican pundit, not because of the actual substance of what he's saying, but the switching back and forth and the wrong predictions. This is about the momentum. They know that the message is to push the momentum. But again, and this is why we bring it up, they only need to keep up this momentum talk, this joyous talk, not asking her questions for less than 3 months. Now, that's why she has made it a part of her strategy not to talk to the press. Now, I think that should tell you a lot about a candidate that's not willing to talk to the American people. I think that should concern you, because we had that same instance with Biden, and look how that turned out, keeping that covered up. But they were, again, able to cover that up for 3.5 years, or attempt to cover it up for 3.5 years, and not asking the tough questions, not do the interviews. And let's say you don't agree with the 3.5 years. Let's just say a year, whatever. They were able to do it. All they have to do is get this into the barn in less than 3 months. But Byron Donalds, who was on the short list, Representative Donalds, who was on the short list for Trump's VP, came out swinging at Harris at a Zoom call with Pennsylvania grassroots organizers. He said, she's not comatose like Joe Biden, but what are her policies? There's no substance to the Harris-Walz campaign, he said. As part of the former President Trump's Trump Force 47 initiative, volunteers logged into a call to hear from Donalds and Pennsylvania GOP Chairman Lawrence Tabis, who encouraged organizers known as captains to focus on framing the issue. We have the right messages. The American people are facing one of the worst economies. They're worried about living paycheck to paycheck. Donalds used the opportunity to challenge how issues such as abortion and threats to democracy are often framed by Democrats. According to Donalds, Harris's campaign is the biggest threat to democracy because she became her party's nominee without winning a single primary vote. He had the Republicans' messaging on the abortion issue should become less defensive. Donald Trump has given us the ability to choose our own destiny. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Now, let's talk about Tim Walz for a moment. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention. Have you been to the, just quickly, completely changing the topic, have you been to the Steuben County Fair yet? I know the fun and games start today, meaning the rides and the games. Have you been? I would love to hear from you, and I wanted to mention that because I'm going to be there from 2 to 4 on Friday. If you have an opportunity, you want to come over and say hi and talk about whatever you want to talk about. That will be Friday. I'll be there from 2 to 4. Also, because we had just such a nice chat yesterday with STICA, which is Southern Tier India Culture Association. Don't forget to mark your calendars. This Saturday is India Day in Centerway Square in Corning. There is all the information you need to know. It begins at 4 o'clock, and I hope you were able to catch that interview on yesterday's program. Okay, that was a little housekeeping I wanted to get to before we completely changed topics and went to Tim Walz. But if you are just joining us, I've asked a question this morning. Do you want to see a more disciplined Trump? Because many, even supporters of his, are saying the same thing. To kind of, I don't like the way they put it in the media because it wasn't coming from a friendly outlet in any way, shape, or form. But it was the kind of the be quiet mode. Not meaning that he doesn't have to get out there, do interviews, do rallies, and things like that, but just pick and choose. Stay on message. And we've already heard from viewers this morning to stay on message. Daniel McCarthy has a piece this morning called Hit the Road, Don. Ramp up the rallies and campaign like it's 2016. And to his point, Trump has obviously been giving rallies, but not to the extent as we've seen in the past. I think he gave two. I think there was two this week. One in North Carolina, and I want to say in the next few days, or maybe today, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. If Donald Trump wants to return to the White House, says Daniel McCarthy, he has to get serious about winning the ground war. Social media memes didn't elect him in 2016. His relentless schedule of campaign rallies did. But this month, the Republican nominee is taking a break from the campaign trail while the Democrats bask in the publicity of their national convention. Is this wise? Now, keep in mind, that is another thing we have kind of neglected to mention a lot. The convention is coming up next week. So then you have that extra media coverage, which will show more momentum for Harris. Polls going even higher. Again, you know my thoughts on polls, but this is what the media's coverage will be. So that's a big week next week as well. I read a short piece this morning, not on the program, off the air, about how Republicans are trying to come up with counter-programming to the convention. We don't know a lot about the convention. I know that Biden is scheduled to speak, Clintons are scheduled to speak, and Obama's scheduled to speak. I'm sure it'll be loaded with celebrities. So that'll be another really good week for Harris when it comes to coverage, and that's coming at a time when we are running down to the wire, where we are going to a point where we are well under 3 months before Election Day. But continuing, Trump held 27 rallies in August of 2016, yet this time he is only a handful. Instead, he's returning to social media, doing the interview with Musk. It's a move straight out of the playbook that failed to get Ron DeSantis the nomination. The Florida governor kicked off his doomed campaign with a Musk interview in May of last year. Social media has a place in 21st century campaigning, but isn't where elections are won. Then again, before Trump's stunning upset 8 years ago, the conventional wisdom was that rallies didn't win elections either. They were Trump's secret weapon, a tactic so old-fashioned that Hillary Clinton's top-dollar political professionals didn't dream it could change the course of the contest. Yes, if you recall at the time, they were saying, oh, these huge rallies are anecdotal. They mean nothing. They would always point out that one person and do an interview with them on the mainstream media at the rally that was, they thought, a negative on Trump. The top-dollar consultants were wrong, and Clinton paid for her campaign's kind of lackluster performance. She expected to win an air war with her side's 2-to-1 fundraising edge, and that's a little bit, according to the strategy from the Harris campaign, that's a little of what she's attempting to do as well. So, what do you think? More rallies from Trump? Would you like to see more rallies? Would you attend a Trump rally? Because we're running short on time, but I would think that there's a potential for numerous Trump rallies in Pennsylvania, and one could be knocking at our door. And I know many of you have attended some in the past, but maybe you would like to attend one in the future. Let me know. Would you attend another Trump rally after what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania? Fair question. But our guest is coming through the door, Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. So stay with us. We're going to take a short break, and then we will be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. And joining us in the studio, Sheriff Allard. Good morning, Jim. Good morning. It's a beautiful day in Steuben County. It is. Now, I want to talk specifically with you because I know that you toured the damage. What does it look like on the ground after Tropical Storm Debbie? It's rough. That whole Canisteo Valley got hit hard. If you look at the Moss Farm there on Willow Bend, just south of Canisteo. His farm, he doesn't even know where some of his equipment is. That's amazing. And, there was a mobile home that he was under contract to sell that ended up under the 119 bridge. Oh, my gosh. I mean, the force of the water was incredible. And the heartbreaking part is, especially down in Woodhull and Jasper, just finished cleanup from 3 years ago and rebuild. And then the exact same folks get hit again. Yeah. I mean, the school's supposed to open this school year. Yeah, and they got a good 30 inches of water in there. And it's full of mud again. And everything that they've done is going to have to be either redone or move on, one of the two. I mean, I guess this is a big question. What's the answer? Why do they keep getting hit? Is there something that can be done? I know you talked with Langworthy, you talked with O'Mara.
In the locals, too, it would appear that more mitigation in the creek bed itself needs to occur.
Okay.
And again, I'm not a civil engineer.
No.
But over and over, that was the message we heard from the residents out there that, hey, after this last flood, all they did was put the stones back.
Oh, my gosh.
And, it needs to be dredged. It needs to be widened. There needs to be some mitigation done. And, there's a lot of finger pointing, of course. Yeah. Always is. But I think moving forward, Soil and Water and DEC and the county are going to get together. I have every faith that they're going to get together and do some meaningful work up there.
And I'm glad that the congressman and senator could stop in. I know the governor was in town too, but you've got to see this to really believe it. The pictures don't do it justice.
And that was my communication to Congressman Langworthy's office on Friday. Was, hey, you really got to see this.
Yeah.
Because not only is it devastating and heartbreaking, thankfully we didn't lose anyone this time. But again, it's the second whack in 3 years that these people have taken. And when I talk to the owners of the businesses in Woodhull, my heart just breaks. But obviously I find the humor in most things.
Right.
It's tough in that. But when I was talking to the owner of the general store there, he said, well, at least we knew this time to leave the front door open and let the water go through.
Wow.
And, he was, we had to take the bottom 2 feet off of the wall again so it can dry out and get the mud out. He said, but, we know what we're doing this time.
Right. And that's a heck of an attitude.
But that was, and when you saw everybody from the community in there on Friday pulling stuff out.
Oh, yeah.
And they had dumpsters that were donated. And they had food that was donated, and we were at the Addison command post on Friday, and all of a sudden people showed up from Watkins, from Landon's, and I can't remember the other restaurant in Watkins with like a dozen pizzas and food and all this stuff for the first responders to have. Nice. And no one called them, and just the outpouring of support and community. I talk about this, and I know people think I'm a little sappy with it. But when I see that, I realize what a special place this is to live.
An amazing
because it doesn't happen everywhere.
No.
And everybody pitched in, and everybody helped out their neighbor. And, all the volunteer firefighters, holy cow, they worked 20 hours straight, pumping out basements. It's just amazing to see everybody come together like that.
Do you know how we can help? I had someone comment this morning. Is Red Cross still always the best place to go?
Red Cross is, and the United Way is, too.
United Way.
Okay. United Way, the Southern Tier, actually has a special donation line for the flood recovery.
Okay.
So that's another place that you can help. And, again, talk to, I think, the Mennonite Church is helping out. The United Methodist Church is helping out. Okay. So there's a lot of venues to be able to help folks, but it's truly, you get very jaded in this job.
Yeah, I'm sure.
and it's truly amazing when you get to see the grassroots efforts where everybody is helping out their neighbor. And I talked to one young man he had been pumping basements. And he lives in Woodhull, and there were 2 elderly ladies that were flooded. He and his wife took them to their house so that they could shower and change and wash clothes, and then went back and made sure the pump was still going in the basement.
Wow.
And it's just there's so many amazing stories.
Yeah, we do live in such a special community. It's a shame it takes something like this for some people. You know what I mean? But I mean
to see it. Yeah.
But it's true. It's very true. Because there's absolutely no way to segue from that, I'm going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. And this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. We're being joined by Sheriff Allard. I heard the garden was fantastic. I know last time we were on the program, the jail garden, how'd it go?
Oh, so good. Obviously, it's been perfect weather for raising vegetables this year. And it was funny. There was a reporter showed up from ETM wanting to do a story on the garden, and it was a day where we were doing a delivery to the food pantry.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah.
Well,
So
that's
I
an
said-
important part of that too. It's not just in the jail. I mean, this just goes to help the
Correct.
community. Going back to what we were talking about with the community.
Well, and it's such a win-win for the inmates because we started it as an educational program so that folks could learn how to be self-sustaining with their food and be food secure when they leave. And it's gone from that to working with Trinity Food Services. They're very excited about it because they're using it to make the menu more nutritious for the inmates, which makes them healthier, which makes everybody happier.
Sure.
But then also we get to give back to the community, and the food that these folks have raised goes back. They get to deliver it, get it delivered to the food pantry, and it goes back to help those folks on this side of the fence that aren't food secure.
Right.
So it's you know, I look at it and actually it was funny because the company that we use for our food preparation, it's a nationwide company, and the Eastern Seaboard rep reached out to me and said, that is the best jail garden I've seen in my 30 years.
Oh, that's great.
And I said, well, that's pretty cool.
But as you said, the garden, you know, it's been a great summer for it. Speaking of summer, you can't think of summer without the Steuben County Fair.
Yes, and it's on right now.
Yeah. Are you guys all set up, ready to go?
We are. We've been, we were there the last 2 days. We have the Emily's Challenge trailer there.
That's why I wanted to mention it.
And hit your mic with
That's
my
all
chin. And it's up and it's going, and you know, it's, I think, the 205th year.
205th year. Yeah.
Yeah, continuous year. And so if you get a chance, it's actually dry this year.
Yes. Yes.
You come enjoy it. It's not muddy.
Yes.
And come enjoy the fair. And yeah, we have our booth is right inside the entry on the left, and there's always going to be a deputy and a correction officer there to answer any questions or for lost and found. And typically we have at least 2 more wandering around through the grounds to
watching
make sure.
the pig races.
Yeah, that's always the big one is the pig races.
Yeah. But you mentioned Emily's Challenge. I don't think we've had a chance to talk about it on the program. Maybe we have. But since it's all finished, tell people exactly what Emily's Challenge is. And also, if you're going to visit it, the way I understand it, I talked to our reporter here, you may want to bring tissues.
Yeah.
I mean, this is moving.
It is very moving. And so that's why it is Emily's Challenge. You know, in a 6 to 8 month period a few years back, we lost 6 young people to either impaired or distracted driving crashes, and one of which, Emily Raleigh, is the daughter of our dispatcher. Right. And so we said, what can we do to try and take these tragedies and build something positive in an educational tool that we can use to help young people, because they were all people under 30,
right?
That to use to help young people see the dangers of those split-second decisions that we make to get in a car or not to get in a car with another driver, or to distract a driver. And so we took those incidents and incorporated them into a trailer. It's a 24-foot car hauler. And it has a video that accompanies it, but it shows the people that passed. It shows one of the cars that was actually in the crashes in the trailer.
Right. And
it walks you through the video, walks you through the crash scene of one of the crashes, and it has interviews with the family members that are still grieving the loss. And it also has interviews with the first responders, and it has the 911 tapes, and it kind of takes you through the horror of one of those scenes, and wraps it up, brings it back around to the positive aspect of what can we do from here. And when we unveiled it, it was probably 50 people that watched the video, and there wasn't a dry eye there. And
really, it's things like the Steuben County Fair is why you created this, because you can take it to a place where people can see it and have a major impact. Same with schools and proms. I know people are already asking to borrow it, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, as soon as we unveiled it, people were saying, hey, how do we get that?
Yeah.
But Kim Clark, our dispatcher, also does a speaking she has a message that she delivers in association with the video, and she's going to be there at the fair a couple of nights. I believe she's there tonight, and a few others to answer questions and deliver her message in hopes that we can save at least one life.
Yeah,
with that education tool. Yes.
And this ties in because I know behind the scenes you do so much, and things like Emily's Challenge is, an initiative you took up. It's not a part that it's not mandatory, right?
No.
The same goes with some of the things that we've been reading about, because I said I always look forward to the newsletter every month, and all the grants you've been able to attain and the undersheriff has been able to obtain. These are so important to keep the sheriff's office at peak condition, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and again, obviously our goal has always been to leave it better than we found it.
Of course.
And as we move forward, we've really built a niche in the technological aspect of investigations. You're going to hear probably in the next day or so, there's going to be a press conference on an enterprise corruption case that our folks did based primarily on evidence recovered from phones, and due to the fact that we have the technology to do that, arrests spanning 3 counties and over 50 charges. And that was in large part due to the ability of our investigators to utilize technology in a way that we've never been able to harness before. And we're in a position now where our agency is poised to go to the next step in DNA analysis. And, these things are stuff that 10 years ago we never would have dreamed of.
Right.
But as we continue to move and train our investigators, they reach further.
Right.
And we're lucky enough to be able to secure grants to get them the technology, software, and hardware and training to encourage that and continue that movement. So, these grants that we get, it seems like a lot of money, but it goes very quickly.
I'm sure.
But it all benefits not only Steuben County, but the entire region as we move forward with this. So I'm very proud of the work that we've done there. And, it just... We analyze every event that we do, every incident that we go through, and say, what do we need to do it better next time?
Right.
When the flood happened 3 years ago, we said we need a vehicle that can get us through high water to rescue folks.
Right.
So the undersheriff, again, went out to...
He's the king of this.
He is, too. He went to, it's called the 1033 program. It's military surplus. We got a high-axled vehicle specifically for water rescue for free through through that program. So the night before the flood, we said, hey, let's just be safe. Let's gas that up, make sure it's going to run, take it out, make sure there's no issues with it. And we used that. We rescued one family, 3 people and a pet that were stranded in high water. We took it to, I think, 6 or 8 different locations where folks were stranded and helped get them out. But without that review and willingness to go out on a limb and get this equipment,
be proactive in a way,
right? We would not be able to save those folks. And I remember when we got this vehicle specifically, there were a couple of legislators that were not happy. No, they were, it's going to cost money. There's going to be maintenance. You're going to, nothing's free. That's what I got told. And I said, well, what price do you put on one life? And it is virtually free.
Well, and it's so impressive what we can do with a quote-unquote rural area, right?
Yes.
And we talked about this with Joe Sempolinski when he was on last week, because you're making the media rounds all of a sudden. I told him I'm nervous. You're gunning for the job here because you're on NBC News, which I thought was an amazing piece. It was showing really and highlighting how much you do in this one specific case, but how much that you do in what would be deemed, especially to them, a rural area.
Right.
I thought that was impressive. And tell us about the TV show.
So
just to completely change topics, but I got to hear about this. How does this come about?
It's funny, and again, obviously, media is interested in the Clayton case,
of course,
and because it's a bit sensational. This is a show called PD True, where it's a retired New York City chief, chief of police, interviews the investigators and the police officers that were involved in investigations, and it's more focused on how the investigation unfolded.
Okay.
And so they contacted myself and DA Wetmore out of
your agent contacted your agent.
Yeah. and Whedon Wetmore, the DA in Chemung County, and Allie Regan, a retired senior investigator from the state police who did a lot of the phone work in that, and did a lot of evidence stuff, and had us down and interviewed us and had us walk them through the investigation. And it's a 2-episode television show on Paramount Plus now.
There you go. All right. I'll pack my bags. We got to take a short break. We'll be right back after this. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. And this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. And we've got Sheriff Allard in the studio. So it's been a while. Normally I start off the program with this, but how's things? I wanted to keep people hooked. How are things going with the county and everything that we've been talking about for quite some time now?
So I believe we're finally going to get closure on this.
Okay.
Our final hearing is August 22nd.
Okay.
Then the judge will rule, and I feel pretty confident about where we're at, where our case is at. Again, all we've done throughout this is follow the law and tell the truth. That's been our single strategy.
Sure. It's a good strategy.
The county's had several other strategies that they followed, but that's been ours, is tell the truth and follow the law. And that's what we continue to do and continue to move forward with. So I look forward to closure. I look forward to having this done. And, it's my hopes that the county government can move forward in a functional manner after this.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see.
I mean, I don't need specifics, but how long has this been dragging on?
Since July of last year.
Wow. So over a year we've been talking about this.
Over a year of fun times.
Yes, especially for you.
Yeah.
Especially for you. But that's great. We'll have to have you on as soon as that decision's made.
Yep.
But so once you're done with your case, the judge can take how long? Is there a time frame on that?
Typically, there's no time frame.
On
I'm
any
sure
of
it'll
this,
be a written decision
Yeah.
that'll come out after the fact. So typically it takes anywhere from a couple weeks to a month or two.
Okay. Well, we'll talk to you before then.
But he'll have, he's got a lot of stuff to go through.
Oh, of course.
To make up his...
year. Yes.
And this is an Article 78, which is... It actually sets up the judge as the fact finder.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of the legislature, and you mentioned them earlier, what's going on with the sticker stores, right? The pot shop. People question me all the time because we do talk about it on this show quite a bit because it's such a wild, wild west failed plan from New York State.
Right.
Typical.
Yep.
So where are we at with the county finally being able to enforce it?
So, in this year's budget, there was actually a change to the cannabis law that made it so that counties and cities can pass their own local law, mirroring kind of what the OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management, does. The Office of Cannabis Management has a number of criminal investigators. They're all sworn law enforcement. And that's who you see go to the sticker stores when they post them, shut them down, and seize.
Right.
Those are actual police officers coming in, doing that, and taking away products, seizing it, putting it in evidence, etc. So now the county can do the same thing.
Good.
I obviously advocated very strongly, as did the district attorney. Let's pass that law. Mm-hmm. Let's get some enforcement out there. People have been begging for our assistance for the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. Please help us. And you know how bad these places smell.
It's horrible.
The amount of foot traffic in and out. And so I was hopeful that the county would pass a meaningful law that would allow us to enforce this. Unfortunately, the law that the county came up with names their enforcement agent as Weights and Measures.
Is any other county doing that?
No, not that I've... And we've done surveys. Every other county is teaming with their sheriff.
Right.
Because when you go into these places, there's going to be large amounts of marijuana.
Yes.
More than what can be legally possessed.
Obviously.
There's a lot of criminal activity that goes along with this. And again, there's a lot of search warrant type material in there. Once you break that criminality, you can build a good case and really shut them down. And there's also the civil component. But again, every sheriff's office is mandated by New York State Constitution to have a civil office.
Right.
And that's what they do. So there's a public hearing before the next legislative meeting.
Oh, okay.
It's my hopes that some folks come in and voice their opinion.
Yeah.
But
I can't imagine Weights and Measures wants this.
I have no idea.
You know, I mean, I guess we can't speculate, but that doesn't seem like when you sign up for Weights and Measures,
right?
This is not the avenue.
Typically, you're inspecting.
What kind of teeth would it even have with them? Is it just a financial aspect?
It's just the civil part where
so
you post it, and they can get fined if they open it back up.
Now,
again.
would you say people that sell drugs illegally are known for paying fines? You didn't say that. I put the words in. That's my words.
Well,
okay?
and that's my issue with this proposed law is that it protects these illegal drug dealers from prosecution.
Goes out of the way to protect them.
Yeah. And I don't think that's what is going to best serve our constituents.
Mm-mm.
I don't think that's obviously. And I go back to the website for the Office of Cannabis Management. And it's all about, this is a public safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
So let's engage public safety. I mean, this is even the governor's mandate. Let's engage public safety, work with our law enforcement to shut these down.
Oh, yeah, because when they changed this rule in the budget, they did it kicking and screaming.
Yes.
So, they heard enough from constituents that they wanted something changed.
They had to do something.
And now we have the opportunity to change it.
Yeah.
And, okay, let's move on. Let's get away from that because, that's one frustrates me.
Yes.
It's literally too close to home. Yeah. So, you've been talking about forever. Mm-hmm. I just got affected by it. Now I'm mad. I'm very selfish that way. When it affects me, it's my biggest focus. Tell me about the Sheriff's Summer Camp.
So the Sheriff's Summer Camp is doing great. Typically it's 140 kids a week from all over the state, and it's kids that wouldn't get a vacation otherwise, and they get to spend a week on Cuca Lake.
Oh, wow.
For
that's
free.
Great. Oh, wow.
And in Steuben County, we sent 12 this year, and they were all identified by our school resource officers as good candidates, ages 9 through 12, and both male and female. And it's just a phenomenal program. What's really exciting for me right now, I'm on a committee. I'm the chair of the committee for wellness with the Sheriff's Association, and we're working and raising money to add a wellness component to the sheriff's camp.
Okay.
So that we're going to set up a place where first responders can go on retreats that have suffered a traumatic issue or that are just in need of assistance, and instead of talking about wellness, we're actually going to teach it, provide training on it, provide training on nutrition, wellness, financial stability, relationship building, all of these things, because I've been doing this a while.
Yeah.
I'm in my 36th year.
Yeah, right.
Frustrated officers make bad decisions.
Right.
And frustrated officers become frustrated because of accumulation of stress, accumulation of traumatic issues, all of those things. So anything we can do.
This ties in exactly what you're saying on NBC News.
Yes. Anything we can do that can help those folks that are struggling maintain their mental acuity so that they can be active law enforcement officers.
The best officers they can be.
And not make bad decisions due to frustration.
What a great idea.
It's a win-win for society. It's a win-win for law enforcement. So I'm obviously, as you can tell, I'm passionate about this.
Yeah, you should be.
And we're making great strides. As soon as we introduced this, people jumped on board, and we're teaming with Homeland Security, with DCJS, with the Office of Mental Health, the Mental Health Association of New York State, and everybody's kind of jumping into this umbrella.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very excited about that.
Again, proving the idea that proactive, not just waiting around. What a brilliant idea. Is there ways that people can help on that, or is that just going through the planning process now?
It's going through the planning process, but there's going to be a pretty major fundraising event coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that you're in the loop on that.
Of course, please do. And speaking of fundraising event, this was a good segue. I almost forgot to mention the golf tournament.
Yes.
That's
Friday the
right
23rd.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, where did summer go? You excited for it?
I know. I am excited for it. It's always a good time. That's where we raise money for our Memorial Park.
Yeah. And if you haven't, go to the Memorial Park. Now, where can people find out more? Just call your office if they want to start a team?
If they want to call 607-622-3930, they can talk to Terry Moore.
Okay.
And she can give them all the information on that.
Sign up for a team. And
yeah.
When
if you want to be on a team, you just need an active or retired law enforcement member on your team.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right. So before we go, we got a couple minutes here, but I want to go through a couple quick things. And I don't normally get too much into national politics with you, but because of Kamala Harris's and really Walz's stance in the past on the police, what were your thoughts when she became the nominee and he became the VP pick? Again, no one got to vote on this.
Right.
That was my talk. What were your initial reactions?
I was not surprised when she became the nominee. Obviously, the Democratic Party had to do something and had to do something fast.
Yeah.
Walz surprised me. I honestly thought the Pennsylvania governor would be the pick.
Yeah.
I thought he was
kind of the no-brainer pick, really.
Yeah, for me, and you know, I've been impressed. I don't always agree with what he does, but he's definitely a leader. And with everything that happened in Minneapolis during the riots, I'm a little troubled as to what the emphasis on law enforcement is going to be at the national level. Should that be the policymakers?
Right. And the frustrating part about it, many frustrating parts, we know from their past, if we judge them by their past, of course we know which they're headed. Right now, they have no policy up on their website. We're learning nothing. There's no interviews. These seem like questions we should know.
Yeah, there's been no interviews.
No.
Yeah.
You have officially done more interviews today, Kamala Harris has, in the last 24 days. And the thing is, with such a shortened time frame, it's they're running out the clock. I think.
And you know, if I'm a Democratic strategist, I'm going to delay the interviews as long as possible.
Yeah.
Because that's when things start to unravel.
Yes, we've seen that. One thing I mentioned, just to change off, because I want to pick your brain on that, kind of tying it in somehow. The New York Sheriff's Conference. We didn't talk about the New York State Sheriff's Conference.
Yep.
Is that just a bunch of sheriffs sitting around and complaining about Albany?
Actually, no. What it is it's education and it's legal updates, then it's a bunch of sheriffs sitting around going, how can we make things better?
Good.
We did a presentation on the wellness thing I just talked about at the Sheriff's Conference, and it was fairly well attended. There was over 30 sheriffs there, and I started my presentation with, anyone in here who hasn't lost a member to suicide, raise your hand. And there wasn't one hand that went up.
That's horrible.
And that's how we started our presentation on the wellness part for the camp. But it's a lot of serious discussions about what we see, what we can do to mitigate it, and where we go as a group of professionals. Because I know, and this is part of the issue with Albany, is, you know, downstate, I think they think every upstate rural sheriff has a wad of chew in their mouth and
boss hog from the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah, and don't realize the professional sheriffs that we have. I mean, I look at all the sheriffs around us, and they're all incredibly knowledgeable. And you've interviewed Sheriff Schramm.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's got his master's degree.
Yeah.
Incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly professional law enforcement professionals. And I think this past year we spent a lot of time as an association on the floor up in Albany, talking with legislators, saying, hey, this is who we are and this is what we can help with. And I think that helped us considerably. Last year at the Winter Conference was the first time in 10 years that the governor has actually come to our conference.
Oh, really?
So, and she was smart. She came in, spoke quickly, and left before any questions. So I got to give her credit for that.
Speaking of taking no questions, that was my segue. She took no questions.
But yeah, it's the conference itself is it's a collaborative time where we get together as professionals and say, what can we do better? What do we need to look out for?
Sure.
And what trends are you seeing?
Gotcha. Well, good. I just thought, sitting around talking about bail reform all the time, getting yourselves worked up.
There is some of that.
I'm sure there is at the coffee.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we go, because we're just about out of time, I this is kind of obligatory. I've got to ask you this, but since you're running unopposed, but how's the campaign going?
It's going very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. You have to get that one in. Check. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of, not that, changing it up, but just you were telling me the other day, and this is fantastic. This is why the people that watch Frankly Speaking are so special. You received such a nice donation.
I did. A nice donation, a nice note from a viewer, and thank you. and it was just a total surprise because I have a P.O. box for my campaign, and I don't check it every day.
Sure.
So it was probably 3 weeks since I checked it, and I was, what a surprise.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
And it was because of being on Frankly Speaking.
Yeah, Joe told me, I guess I'm going to just tell stories out of school. Joe Semplinsky was in Rochester doing something. Someone stopped him and goes, "Are you Joe?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Yeah, I always saw you on Frankly Speaking." And Rochester,
there you go.
See the power. To anybody thinking about sponsoring on this show, remember, these are all based on true stories. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. Are you going to be able to make it out to the fair? Are you too busy?
Oh, yeah, I make it out almost every day.
Oh, do you get to make it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I try to do a walkthrough every day.
Yeah.
See what's going on.
Grab
touch
a root
base.
Beer.
Yeah. That's the best root beer ever.
Yeah.
Yep. Touch base and just make sure things are firing on all cylinders.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna be there 2 to 4 for Joe. Suckered me into it.
Oh, you're gonna be at the booth?
Yeah, I'm gonna be at the booth from 2 to 4 on Friday. So I'll stop
That's
over.
good.
I can't wait to see Emily's challenge. Well, Sheriff, thanks so much for being on the show. We'll have to talk again soon.
Yeah,
All
anytime.
Right. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime
thanks,
as well.
Before you go,
Yeah,
thanks for being one of the few local newsmakers
Thank you.
that we have, and it's so incredibly important what you do.
Well, thank you. That's a great way to end the program, huh? Join us every weekday morning at 6. I'm all flustered. Every weekday morning at 6 for Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early.